Thank you, Gormalgath Chair, and thank you all for giving us your time today and for all of the work you have done on this really important issue. I want to use my time more to gain from your knowledge and get your guidance, I guess. Our job is to try and frame legislation that will in some way begin to bring about justice for these human rights atrocities. And I've listened closely to you, and I've read all your submissions, and I thank you all for those. But I would appreciate if Professor Scratton could talk to us a little bit about, when he speaks about the coronial process and about investigating each and every one of these deaths. If we're talking about 9,000 babies, and I think it was, somewhere in the region of 200 women, and much of this being historical, I suppose my first question would be, what is the scale of such investigation? What is going to be involved in it in terms of resources and time and expertise? I appreciate that's a very broad question, but I think it would be really important that if you can share that with us, because in doing this, we want to try and get it right, and we want to try and bring about justice. And I suppose, Professor, I don't know if I'm picking you up correctly, but I've heard you say that the current coroner's office doesn't have the resources, and I don't know if maybe you would propose that this is something that actually should be, we should be engaging external and international leadership on, as a state. So I'd like your comments on that. And then I suppose I would also just like to hear from Catherine and Susan and Mary, just in terms of, I appreciate the urgency. This is 4 years. It's taken too long to get us this far. But where does the balance come in terms of trying to progress this, what we have in front of us, or starting again from scratch?
Okay, thanks, Senator. I'm actually going to bring in Ms. Corliss and Ms. Lowen first. So, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, as regards that, I wonder about that as well. How long would it take? It was mentioned before that someone maybe just in a quick remark said you could be talking about up to 25 years if you were to examine every little baby, for whatever. So I'm a bit lost there. I don't understand really the coroner and the workings of the agency, but I can imagine it would be enormous. But it was mentioned as well that justice doesn't come at a fair price, at a cheap price. But I mean, this is all about justice, and we really have to do the very best we can to ensure that every family member is satisfied with how their little brother or sister, how their little remains are examined. But also, the question, maybe it's not appropriate at this stage, but maybe later on in the meeting, as regards costs and who is going to pay the whole cost of exhumation, DNA testing. It hasn't really been spelled out in the burial report. Now, I have been campaigning as best I can for I call them the perpetrators, people who did this, who put the babies there in such circumstances, who discarded the babies. What about the religious orders? Are they being called in? We haven't been. I would really very anxious to know that. As regards the Bon Secours sisters in Tuam, they are, in my opinion, no longer a religious congregation as such. They're first and foremost these days a business, and they are a multi-billion corporation. They have merged with the United States, with the Mercy Sisters in the United States and the Bon Secours Sisters in the United States, and they are a multi-billion euro company. And surely I would hope that the government is approaching them to at least, well, as regards for Tuam specifically, and because we know how many babies have died and are missing, and I would like to forward that idea just to tell us who is funding all this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Carr. Very briefly, Ms. Lowen, if that's okay.
Deputy Fitzpatrick, Senator Fitzpatrick, I think, yeah, it's going to be an incredibly long process if we are to examine every single death. But I think it's the price. I agree. It's the price of having dispensed with the state's obligations towards all of its citizens, and you know, other jurisdictions, the state has paid that price. I would argue, though, that when it comes to perhaps speeding up the process for certain family members, there are family members today who want to know where their loved ones are buried, how they died. So those cases could be prioritised, and the children for whom nobody so far is coming forward could be, unfortunately, left to the back of the list. But we should deal with those people, those families who are suffering today. I totally concur with Catherine on the needs to hold the various religious orders to account. We have the perverse situation in Ireland that these organisations, businesses, as Catherine rightly says, we as taxpayers are actually helping to fund those organisations because we continue to outsource vital social services to them. And in some of the campuses where these atrocities occurred, the same religious orders are still in situ providing services to, for example, intellectually disabled individuals. So we have to get our house in order as a state and decide, are we going to subsidise these organisations who carried out the atrocities, or are we going to absolutely cull them from the list of organisations that we might engage in the provision of social services? That has to be dealt with.